We're really pleased to have Dan Olsen, field biologist with North Gulf Oceanic Society, discussing intelligence among toothed whales. Hey, Dave.
We're almost there. Congratulations to all of you who held through all day long. I didn't think I was going to make it. If it weren't for that lunch in the sunshine, I would have been sunk. My name is Dan. I work with the North Gulf Oceanic Society. We're a small nonprofit. We monitor the health and well-being of the killer whale populations in Prince William Sound and in Kenai Fjords. I'm also a member of the Round Earth Society, established in 500 BC. You might have heard of that one. If anyone loves stickers, I have some whale stickers. They're on the back table there. Who wants one right now? Right now? Anybody? Oh, yeah, I saw that. Awesome. Yesterday I gave a quick talk about culture we see in killer whales, and this one's focused a little more on intelligence because I find it absolutely fascinating. I include all the toothed whales because the porpoise, harbor porpoise, Dall's porpoise, sperm whales, beaked whales that we see in Prince William Sound from time to time fit the category of highly intelligent individuals. This is the AJ pod of killer whales in Resurrection Bay. And I'll get back to echolocation in a moment. Amongst all the whales we have in the world, most of the really big ones are baleen whales. That's not exclusively true. Sperm whales quite large. But in this image, everything facing with its rostrum or nose to the right is a baleen whale, and all the ones facing the other way, including all the tiny ones, are toothed whales, including all the dolphins and all the porpoise and belugas and narwhals. All of those are considered toothed whales. And I just want to mention some examples of some of the intelligent animals that we have on this planet. There's a good list of highly intelligent animals. Obviously, as we as humans are very intelligent most of the time. You may have heard of Chaser, the border collie, who learned over 1,000 names of stuffed animal pets. And it was actually tested. You might have heard of Coco the gorilla, who supposedly learned over 1,000 signs in American Sign Language. They were modified signs. I don't know if that one was actually tested, but bonobos, chimpanzees, gorillas have all been taught sign language, even though that is not their natural capability. They do use lots of gestures in their natural environment. We heard about octopus today. Dave took off. That was excellent, and had some octopus specialists here who have not only a central brain, but nervous systems in each arm that are fairly independent. Of course, crows and ravens, New Caledonian crows can do multitasking, like needing to take the short stick instead of the small stick and trying to activate the ball that rolls down the thing to disrupt the lever. And they learn from those behaviors to adapt to new novel problems and adapt what they've learned in the next problem. And that's a great example of an animal that doesn't have to be large and have a large brain. Their brains are large compared to their body size, but not in overall capabilities. And of course, we have killer whales, all the porpoise, all the dolphins, all the toothed whales. Just nice to get a look, first of all, of quite a few apes. We have always prided ourselves, humans have largest brains. Well, the sperm whale has the largest brain. The killer whale has the second largest brain. Absolute size is not great. Elephant has a huge brain. They are smart. They never forget. But we have some other differences that are important to look at. One is the brain mass to body mass ratio. It's not good to look at alone, but it does help. But we've also prided ourselves in how complex our brain is, especially here when you compare it to some of the other great apes. Our brains are indeed more complex. Some people look at neuron counts, and we have an incredibly high neuron count. And that's one area in which we win out over some of the other great apes and elephants. And as humans, we have not only a high brain mass to body mass ratio, but a high neuron count. And the toothed whale's neuron count is actually, the killer whale and sperm whale have are up with us on neuron count, actually. Our human brain's not been the same anymore over time. When we look at skulls through the fossil record, there was a massive spike about 2 million years ago, and a bunch of different theories on why that might be. The advent of fire and cooking could give us nutrition or protection from animals, cooking meats, less diseases, but perhaps better sleep by protecting us from predators, all these things. Anyway, we did have a spike. There is some people who argue that our brains have gotten a little smaller recently from the agricultural revolution, where population exploded, but available protein did not, is one theory there. So protein is one thought. Better rest and sleep for brain development is absolutely shown through time. But we have our brain sizes have changed over time. But look at this. Size is not my takeaway from this image, but complexity is. I showed this to everybody yesterday who was here. And the amount of cortical folding in the surface of the toothed whale brain, this is true for all toothed whales, to a certain extent for the baleen whales, but toothed whales, A, have a very high brain mass to body mass ratio and high complexity in the brain, even more so than us. That gives more gray matter by percentage in the brain, and it gives just more surface area, which is where a lot of the cognitive processes are occurring. That cerebellum is huge too, because we're not quite sure why, but there's cerebellums often in 3D movement and in touching tactile senses for humans. We don't know if that's the same for toothed whales, but it certainly would explain part of why that cerebellum is so massive. Feeling smart now? How many people feel that they're relatively smart? I mean, more or less relatively smart, anyone? And I'm not going to make you raise your hand for this, but imagine if you had to. Raise your hand if you think you're above average intelligence for humans. Anybody? There's a statistic out, a report that said that 65% of humans rate their own intelligence above average. How's that one for you? Some of the ways that we see intelligence, of course, is memory. You know, what is intelligence? It's the ability to take memories and make judgments on those memories and solve problems. And we see problem solving, we see tool use in crows and ravens, in dolphins, in chimpanzees and bonobos. We see all those things. It's just the extent at which we have. And if we were to reduce down our own capabilities, imagine if you took away our language, our books, our internet, how would that affect our ability to solve problems and situations? It's good to ponder that and how much of a role these 5 digits play with tool making, and how much the written word, the spoken word, the ability to communicate with vocabulary plays into it. But amongst whales and other species, we do see memory. We see learned behavior. We see this in insects. We see bumblebees coming back after finding some pollen, and they come back to the hive and they do a little dance. And then when they end the dance, the angle from the sun to their orientation is the direction of where to go for that pollen source, and the other bees will go find that direction. They tested, they know this because they would use an artificial light when they'd come back and change everything on them, and they'd do the dance, and the angle would be, from the direction they came. I don't know how big the transmitters are for the bumblebees, but it's quite fascinating. You may have heard of the mirror test, when you put a dot on somebody's face, and they look at the mirror, and children initially don't know, but then eventually they figure out that that's actually them, not some adversary. I don't know if you've seen the brown bear image where there's a mirror outside and walks up and freaks out and tries to swat at the mirror because it thinks it's an enemy. But many animal species, including the dolphins, do pass the mirror test, where they start to see that the changes in the mirror are the changes that they themselves are performing, which is a show of self-awareness, and some would even say on the road to consciousness. And of course, this one I find really interesting. In the Bahamas, they test dolphins, and they'll teach them on an iPad that triangle means scarf, and that the circle means this person, or that means one certain person, and the square means another person, and that the line means a sponge, using abstract images. And we don't see grammar and syntax and vocabulary in the natural communication styles of dolphins and toothed whales, but they are still able to pick up on what we're trying to teach them. And when asked to take the scarf from so-and-so and give it to so-and-so, where the order matters, they have performed well with learning our attempts at abstract symbols. Now, that may not sound like such a huge thing, but when you start going outside of what your natural capabilities are, that's when true intelligence starts to get remarkable. And we see it in specialization, whether it's diet or behavior. We see it in preferences, and we see it in patterns that I'd like to get into. We showed this one yesterday, and I just put it up again for the sake of those people who weren't here or those people online. You probably heard residents, transients, offshores. Those names are misleading, so I don't like to use them. Fish specialists, mammal specialists, and shark specialists are these three types. And we're looking down the barrel. There's been a formal proposal to call them different species. We may no longer have one species, Orcinus orca. We may have Orcinus ater for the fish specialists, Orcinus rectipinus for the mammal specialists, and nothing formally proposed yet for the offshore because we don't know enough about them to distinguish. But here we see where we've learned from grandma, we've learned from mom, this is what we eat, this is where we go to forage, and you get this high degree of specialization. That does not occur without good solid memory, good solid preferences, judgment, decision-making processes that help your survival. Most of the food that these animals are eating is very high in fat content. Think about it, Chinook salmon, chum salmon, coho salmon, or for the mammal specialist, Dall's porpoise, harbor seal, very high in fat content, very caloric, because they have a big brain that they've got to feed. And if you have any Neanderthal friends, apparently they died out because their brains were bigger than ours at the time and couldn't feed them because the caloric intake was just too, that's one theory on why they did not survive out. So these are big animals, inefficient swimmers based on their width and with a huge brain to feed calorically. And we will likely be looking down the barrel at more than one species. So the current proposal is to branch off two from the one, and the rest will remain. But you can see around the world, northern hemisphere on the left, southern hemisphere on the right, different ecotypes that have specialized in their diet and therefore formed patterns that have helped their survival by keying in and getting really, really good at one type of foraging behavior or another. And yesterday we talked about the evidence of culture within these family units in killer whales. Their diets are specific. They learned that from mom and grandma. The rubbing beaches they use are specific to pods. They learned that from their families. Where they fish, where they hunt. We see patterns. You hear the word transient for mammal hunters, and it's misleading because you think, oh, they're all over the place all the time. No, they have their core range and they have their favorite haunts. They just show up less predictably. So they got the name transient, but really they have their favorite haunts that they go to, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The diet and fishing spots. We learn this by collecting salmon scales and by collecting fecal matter, poop, essentially from killer whales, to look at what they're feeding on. And we see that the different groups are doing different things in different areas. We pick it up with a pool net. When animals are turning and diving, we know they're catching fish, sharing fish when they come together. We follow behind them to look for the poop, and what we find is that Chinook is still highly important, but maybe not as important as we thought in the past. Chum salmon is equally as important, if not more. Coho, very important, and halibut and flounder are indeed a consistent, though smaller, portion of their diet. As I show this graph, it's easy to assume, you see all the purple there? That's Chinook salmon, the orange is chum salmon, and the silver is silver. And it looks like that's a whole lot of Chinook, except that that's a very easy place to collect samples, where we go every single year and the animals are very predictable there. That dynamic is only 1 month long, mid-May to mid-June, and it attracts a mean of 18 animals per day there. Whereas meanwhile in Hinchbrook entrance, during a longer time span, 3 or 4 months, April, May, June, July, we attract an average of 34 animals for a longer time range, eating primarily chum. So we do think that just between these two dynamics, more chum may be eaten than Chinook, and it's very pod specific. We never see the ABs, AIs, AJs show up in Kenai fjords. And if we see the AD8s, AD16s, AKs in Hinchinbrook, it's later after that 1 month dynamic is already done. Here's Agnes Cove and Kenai fjords. Very specific patterns and trends we see. Learn from mom, learn from grandmother. In Hinchinbrook entrance, they use the whole entrance, same pods, year on year, every year, same time they show up to go looking for animals. For the mammal hunting ones, we have a group called Matushka and her young ones, HC109. They hunt sea lions a lot. And interestingly, and this is part of why I don't like the word transient, at the rookery in the Chiswells that the Sea Life Center has the cameras on, 90% of our sightings are Matushka and her group. It's not a random assortment of mammal-eating killer whales. That's why I don't like transient. It's not like they're just randomly roaming and plucking off. They have habits. They've learned that spot. I would assume that they know every crack and crevice and have learned how those sea lions respond to a predator showing up and swimming around. They know what season the young ones are going to be trying to learn how to swim. I think we often underestimate the power and importance of learning and skill for these top predators. I don't think they can just run around and eat whatever they want and survive. They've got that learning, and that skill is so hugely important. This same group, Matushka and hers, are also responsible for 90% of our sightings at the Needle in Montague Strait. It's not just a random hodgepodge of transients that show up there, mammal eaters that show up there, although others do, but 90% of our sightings are this one group. So there's absolutely some patterns and habits there that lead to some of this diet specialization. The Chugach transients, the ones that swam through the Exxon Valdez oil spill, in 1989, they lost 9 members almost immediately, and they're down to probably 6 animals now, 6 or 7. We think one of those is missing out of the original 22. They make up 90% of our sightings over the northwestern moraine and Nyalek moraine and Kenai fjords. A couple other pods do, but almost 90% of all sightings of mammal-eating killer whales in there foraging on harbor seals is that one family. And the same thing at Unaquik and Columbia moraine. And I wouldn't know this without the help of Amanda Bauer in Valdez. She sent us a lot of photos and has only ever seen the AT1s, Chugach transient, the same family as we get in Kenai fjords, crossing the moraine. It's just a niche that they've found and they've figured out. And if they just randomly roam the ocean, they may not be a good survival strategy. Has anyone ever been through Chicken Pass in Seward or heard it on the radio? You've got Cape Ialik, and you go around the rocks at the Cape, or you can just squeeze a boat through, only about 40 feet wide probably, and only about 15 feet deep. And you can just get through there so tight you have to call on the radio, northbound Chicken Pass, southbound Chicken Pass. And we've seen killer whales swim through there. Have you guys seen them swim through there before? A couple times we've seen them go through, and it's only the pods that are local to the area. The random visiting pods are always outside around. That's the same in the Chiswell Islands too. There's some narrow passes like Pete's Pass, and then some island groups where we've seen some of the locals go through these narrow passes, but while the rarely sighted pods are going way around. It's just highly fascinating, these patterns that we see in movement, in habits, which relates to their diet, but also their spatial orientation. I showed the big brain of anyone in the dolphin family. Killer whales have an enormous brain. Sperm whales, highly complicated brain. There's 2 theories on why we would have such a complicated brain. And one of them is one of the theories on why humans had an explosion in brain size was social living, that we couldn't move from tribes and families up to towns and cities without an increase in social complexity. So social complexity and nuance is one of the thoughts on why they, but probably the leading thought is interpretation of echolocation. As they're echolocating, they're sending clicks out their melon, out forward. It's bouncing back to their lower jaw. And I would like you for a minute to think how good your subtle vision is. Imagine being out in the sunshine, not looking at the sun, and you don't see the bird, but you know for a second a bird or an airplane flew between you and the sun. Everybody's had that experience, right? A little change in the lighting, and you know something walked past your window or went in between you and the sun. You just know it because the lighting changed. Imagine applying that to an animal that lives its whole life in the water, has a complicated brain, and is tuned into acoustics, listening to the environment. Not only can they click and find food, but say they're swimming across in front of a glacier where there's waves on a gravel beach, and that's a constant sound that they're hearing, and their sibling swims between them and the beach. That subtle difference in the sound coming to them is going to make a little shadow or a little change in the sound. Actively and passively, they are acoustic animals and constantly processing this information. That's one of the leading theories on why their brains are so complex. And they can eavesdrop. I could hear your echolocation. If you're echolocating and it bounces off the fish, comes to me. Their echolocation is believed to be so good that it's believed to be so good that they've seen them choose between an 1/8 and 1/4 inch ball bearing at the end of a pool. Dolphins have been known to find fish underneath sand where they can't see them. Oops, I thought I had a different slide next. There it is. Dolphins have been known to find fish under sand just by a couple clicks. They know where it is. I would not be surprised. They've been reported to treat pregnant women differently in a pool. I would not be surprised if they knew which of their siblings had tumors, which were pregnant, which had a fish in its mouth just with a couple clicks, which had a full belly just with a couple clicks, broken ribs. Any of that would just be highly available information if every one of them is an ultrasound doctor, essentially, radiation technologist. And that kind of capability removes some of the need for some of the other kind of communication. People always ask me, what are they saying? And it does not appear to be about vocabulary or grammar. The way they pass information is so different. With that echolocation, they're getting a wealth of information. They don't need to say, where are you? They always know where each other are. And for a couple of reasons I'll get to in just 1 minute. Megan saw a sperm whale a couple days ago out here in Prince William Sound. I probably saw the same one. This recording is probably from the same one. And just a different type of echolocation. We can actually identify all the different species of toothed whales. I can't. There are scientists who can identify all of them by the type of echolocation, how high, how low the frequency, how broadband it is, the space between the interclick interval, and the properties of the. You're hearing the echo off the bottom in 700 feet of water. And if you're a halibut, you're a little scared at the moment. Clicking off the swim bladder of the fish and doing quite well that way. Sperm whales have a, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Sperm whales have a very interesting other style of communication called codas. Anyone ever heard of it? It's like, they use echolocation, but it's not clicking to find food or to navigate. What they do is, like, there's a clan, a whole group, social group, that they might call the 3+1 clan. And from those members, you'd hear click, 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 click. And you'd hear that all day long, and they're signaling their social group, their clan. It's not really a family group per se, but a social foraging group. And you have the 2+2 clan, click, 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 click. And these are kind of like family identifiers, but they're called codas. And it's a highly interesting way for them to keep group cohesion. There is a recent paper that I feel is a little clickbaity, but it's saying that They used to think there were 21 codas, and they broke it down into 9,000, and they're claiming that it's more like vocabulary, when the previous researchers were saying, well, those are variations. So it's not quite so likely that it's as complex as they're claiming at the moment. But just the codas themselves are super cool, where you have these social groups knowing who each other are. This style of communication is just so different. And lastly, we heard this yesterday too. Everybody touch your nose. Imagine you have 2 nostrils, but if you're a dolphin, killer whale, beluga, you have them up on top of your forehead, right? Inside one blowhole, but there's 2 nasal passages. Imagine with one nostril you can do, and the other one at the same time. You ready? That's one animal. Everybody hear the whistle and the buzz at the same time. What's cool about those calls is that the high frequency only goes out forward, the low frequency goes in all directions. So if mom is calling and you only hear the low frequency, you know she's facing away from you. If you hear both, she's facing towards you. If she's far away, then the whistle has less intensity because it loses energy a little quicker. And of course, part of what we do out here in Hinchinbrook Entrance and Montague Strait and Pony Cove in Resurrection Bay, also in Marmot and Kachemak Bay, we have hydrophones that stay down all winter, 5 minutes on, 20 minutes off. And Hannah Myers at UAF, she just finished up a PhD looking at abundance, relative abundance throughout the year. When are those areas really busy or not? And we can tell which families there. Not only is it busy in Montague in December, but we know which pods it is. 8016 pods, AJ pods, and so on. And lastly, you heard this yesterday too, but it's just too good. I can't resist. It's so good. They have to learn the calls in the first place. You're going to hear a mom call, and the calf will be mimicking the call. I feel it's like cheating. Oh. So as I mentioned before, why would you have a complex brain? It's probably echolocation, interpreting spatial. Teachers often talk about how important it is to break down intelligences. Some people are musically intelligent, emotionally intelligent, spatially intelligent, linguistic. This is not news to us, right? We all, not just one intelligence, but many. And my guess is if you were to define linguistic intelligence, humans would have far superior intelligence over any other animal because of our ability to have vocabulary, grammar, syntax. But if you were to test spatial intelligence, that all of the toothed whales would vastly outperform us in spatial intelligence and perhaps intelligence overall. Franz de Waal is an amazing author, has a book I really love called Mama's Last Hug, and this one is Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are? And we just, it's really hard to fit a dolphin into an MRI, especially a live one. And so as we increase our technology, I think we're going to be surprised at what we are finding. And lastly, here's EAC again in Cordova. Every single whale has a scapula, a humerus, a radius, an ulna, 5 digits, metacarpals, right? So as we're operating our boats out there and taking care of oil in our bilges and making noise, trying to go quiet when we're around whales, more so than we normally would, I'd just like us all to remember that it might be nice to pay a little respect and caution around these animals that may indeed be smarter than us, and all their tool-making digits are locked up in a fin. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks, Dan. Do we have any questions online or in the room?
So I just have a suggestion that when you learn the mother's clicks and squeals that tell her baby to calm down, I'm here to help, you need to provide that information to the guys who are untangling whales so that they can tell them, calm down, I'm here to help.
Right, yes. For those that are trying to disentangle and cut off the ropes, learn how to calm them down. Yeah, that would be excellent. We're available at whalesalaska.org, and again, there's some stickers in the back. Any other questions? Awesome.
Thank you, Dan. And also, Dan spoke yesterday, and his talk on whale cultures will also be on the Prince William Sound Stewardship Foundation website, along with all the talks from yesterday and today. So thanks for the double header, Dan.